Usually when you wake up and you check your phone, there's this underlying expectation that you can figure out what's going on in the world.
Right. You want it to make sense.
Exactly. Like you read a headline, you check a source, maybe read a few paragraphs, and you think, okay, I get it. That's the truth. I understand reality today.
Yeah, because we inherently crave that single unified narrative, you know? Human beings we're basically wired to want a clear start, middle, and end.
Right.
We want facts to just sit neatly in their designated boxes.
But then, you scroll a little further,
Yeah.
and suddenly there are like 5 different articles directly contradicting that very first headline.
Oh, always.
Right. A few swipes later, there's a video claiming the whole event is a manufactured hoax. And then that's followed by some heavily edited meme turning the entire tragedy into this surreal, disjointed joke.
It's chaotic.
It is. Before you know it, that clean, singular truth you thought you had at breakfast is just entirely gone. We're left living in this world defined by uncertainty, endless choices, and just this massive, crushing wave of information overload.
And it is a profoundly disorienting experience for the human brain. I mean, really disorienting. But it is also exactly the landscape we are going to explore today.
Yes, it is. So welcome to today's deep dive into our source material, which is this truly fascinating text exploring Journey 9 postmodern theater.
It's a great text.
It really is. Our mission today is to decode this chaotic, rule-breaking artistic movement that emerged back in the mid-1980s.
Yeah.
We're going to figure out why it completely rejects the very idea of absolute truth, how it brings that beautiful chaos to the stage, and ultimately why you listening right now, are actually the most important part of any postmodern story.
What's fascinating here is that postmodernism isn't just an artistic aesthetic. It isn't merely some trend dictating, what kind of costumes are on stage or the style of the lighting design. The text we are drawing from makes it very, very clear that postmodernism is a socio-historical condition.
So it's bigger than just theater.
Oh, absolutely. It's an overarching way of living. It is a philosophy that actively pushes back against definitions, against categories, against pigeonholes.
Which makes it kind of hard to talk about.
Exactly. It makes it thrilling, but yeah, albeit a bit slippery to nail down.
Well, the text literally describes it as anti-definition.
Right.
Which is a pretty hilarious paradox when you're sitting here trying to define it for a listener. But before we can understand how postmodernism broke the rules of the stage, we really have to understand how it broke the rules of reality itself.
Yes. We have to look backwards first.
Right, to his predecessor, modernism. Because postmodernism literally just means after modernism.
Right, and you cannot have a meaningful rebellion without an establishment to rebel against.
Exactly.
Modernism was that establishment. It dominated the 19th and 20th centuries, and it initially started as a rejection of rigid Victorian ideals, focusing really heavily on human subjectivity, perception, and what we call reflexivity.
Which is like a kind of self-awareness in art, right?
Exactly. But crucially, modernism still deeply believed in grand truths.
Okay, let's unpack this. Modernism still thought, hey, we can figure this universe out, right?
Yes, exactly.
It tried to explain the world through these massive overarching systems, whether that was science, grand political theories, definitive historical narratives.
Right. It operated on the belief that if we just looked hard enough, if we were smart enough, the artist or the scientist could reveal the ultimate definitive truth of the human experience.
But then history kind of violently intervened.
It did.
The text highlights how postmodernism evolved as a direct reaction against those absolute truths, leaning instead into like uncertainty, contradiction, irony.
Because it had to.
Right. This massive philosophical shift wasn't just born out of artistic boredom. It was heavily influenced by the sheer trauma of global events, like the Holocaust and the bombing of Hiroshima.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. If modernism is...
Wait, I have an analogy, actually. If modernism is like a completed jigsaw puzzle where the artist shows you exactly what the picture is supposed to be,
right,
like a beautiful, rational landscape.
Okay, I like this.
Postmodernism is throwing the puzzle pieces into the air, tossing in some random Lego bricks, maybe a few paper clips, and asking you to decide what the final picture looks like.
Yes.
And maybe it's not a landscape at all. Maybe it's a commentary on the concept of cardboard.
That intentional deconstruction of narrative is the perfect way to visualize it, because in a post-WWII world relying on absolute authoritarian truths, felt incredibly dangerous.
And woefully inadequate.
Totally inadequate.
Yeah.
You have to imagine being a thinker or an artist in the mid-20th century. The grand modernist idea of human progress, of rationality, of logical systems inevitably leading to a utopian future.
Right, that just vanished.
That entire concept died in the ashes of World War II. When your absolute logic and highly advanced systems result in the atomic bomb and industrialized genocide, you start to deeply mistrust the concept of a singular authoritarian truth.
Yeah, the artist realized that forcing one single perspective wasn't just arrogant. It was like a form of control.
So they completely relinquished that control. They stopped trying to play God with the narrative.
Which completely changes the fundamental rules of theater.
Entirely.
If reality is now viewed as fragmented and entirely subjective, playwrights couldn't just use traditional storytelling anymore. You can't put a neat three-act play on stage where every conflict is resolved by the time the curtain drops if you don't believe neat resolutions exist in real life.
Exactly. They needed entirely new tools to put this chaos on stage.
So what were those tools?
Well, the most radical philosophical shift they employed is known as the death of the author.
Okay, sounds dramatic.
It is. In modernism, the artist controls the meaning. You go to a play to understand the specific message the playwright is trying to impart. But in postmodernism, the author has no final authority over the interpretation. The script is literally just raw material.
Wow. So it embraces reader response theory.
Yes.
Instead of the writer being the ultimate authority, this theory basically argues that meaning is actively created by the audience.
Right.
A play can have as many simultaneous meanings as there are people sitting in the dark watching it, because every single person brings their own lived experience to the interpretation.
Exactly. And to make absolutely sure you know the author isn't in charge, they deploy techniques like deconstruction and pastiche.
Right.
They take established ideas, rip them apart, and reconstruct them in these jarring, bizarre ways. Pastiche is, it's like a theatrical collage drawing from multiple, completely unrelated sources and entirely blurring the lines between high culture and low culture.
A perfect example from the text is Heiner Miller's play, Hamlet Machine.
Oh, yes. Great example.
He doesn't just stage Shakespeare. He takes the recognizable core of Hamlet, chops it up, and mixes it with modern pop culture references and this fragmented, surreal imagery.
Right. He deconstructs the classic sacred text to force the audience to see it as a sensory collision rather than a linear story.
And they fragment the very structure of the performance itself, too, right?
Oh, yeah. Characters might be literally fractured across the stage. You might have 3 different actors on stage, all playing the exact same character at the exact same time, furiously arguing with themselves.
That sounds intense.
It is. And we also see the heavy use of meta-theater. This is theater that constantly reflects on itself, deliberately breaking the illusion that what you're watching is real.
Right. The text mentions this is related to the Brechtian alienation effect.
Yes.
For listeners who might not be theater majors, normally, if a character on stage is crying, the lighting gets dim, sad strings play in the background, and the director does everything in their power to make you cry too.
Right. They want you emotionally hooked.
But with the alienation effect, right when you are about to shed a tear, the director might drop a giant, brightly lit neon sign onto the stage that literally says acting to snap you out of the emotion and force you back into your intellect.
You are constantly reminded to stay awake and think.
Yeah.
And add to that the integration of multiple media. You might have video projections, live music, and visual performance are all happening simultaneously. The source text highlights Robert Wilson's Einstein on the Beach as a prime example of this multi-sensory, non-narrative experience that just sort of washes over the audience.
And we can't forget how much postmodernism absolutely loves pop culture.
Oh, it really does.
It totally rejects the stuffy idea that theater has to be this elite, inaccessible art form. It embraces the mainstream. The text points out how film directors use these exact same theatrical concepts.
Yeah.
Think of Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, with its out-of-order, non-linear timeline that forces you to piece the narrative together. Or Baz Luhrmann's Romeo plus Juliet, which mashes up 400-year-old Shakespearean dialogue with 1990s MTV aesthetics, neon crosses, Hawaiian shirts.
It's the ultimate postmodern pastiche.
But wait, hold on. I have to be honest here and push back on this whole concept a little bit.
Okay, let's hear it.
If I'm paying $80 for a theater ticket and the playwright is effectively dead, and I have to make up my own meaning while watching Shakespeare get thrown into a blender with pop music and 3 actors playing the same role, why am I even there?
That's a fair point.
Doesn't this just make the play a confusing, unwatchable mess? Like, isn't this entire movement just a massive cop-out for writers who didn't want to do the hard work of finishing a story?
This raises an important question, and it is the exact critique, the exact frustration many people feel when they first encounter postmodern art.
It feels like a scam.
It feels like anarchy, and it feels like you are being scammed out of a narrative. But it's crucial to understand the mechanism here. It's not about laziness on the part of the playwright.
Then what is the point of paying for the chaos?
It's about demanding your active participation. For centuries, audiences have been trained to be entirely passive consumers.
Right.
You buy your ticket, you sit in the dark, you shut your mouth, and you let the artist spoon-feed you the moral of the story. Postmodernism flat out refuses to spoon-feed you.
Oh.
By breaking the narrative, it transforms you from a passive consumer into an active meaning maker. It forces you to engage with the inherent absurdity of life. The chaos isn't a mistake, the chaos is the point, because life itself does not come with a narrator explaining the moral at the end of the day.
Oh, wow. So you aren't just watching the play, you are collaborating with it.
Exactly. Now that we understand the toolkit, this pastiche, this deconstruction, the neon signs breaking the illusion, and the death of the author, we can look at how specific writers actually deploy these tools to dissect modern society.
Let's look at the playwrights of the absurd.
Yep.
Because once you stop expecting a traditional story and put on that postmodern lens, these plays go from being weird to being incredibly profound.
Right.
Take Sam Shepard, for instance. He's an absolute master at exploring the postmodern condition, specifically within the mythology of America.
Shepard is fascinating because he uses fragmentation to dismantle the American dream from the inside out. The text highlights his plays Buried Child and Curse of the Starving Class.
Yeah.
What's notable about Shepard's technique is that he tricks you. These plays often start off looking like traditional, realistic family dramas. You settle into your seat thinking you're watching a standard, comfortable, modernist play about a rural family.
And then the floor completely falls out from under you.
The narrative absolutely devolves, the characters become fractured, the logical sequence of events breaks down, and the audience is bombarded with hallucinatory, surreal imagery. A buried secret literally and figuratively rots the landscape. He uses this disjointed, broken structure to mirror the hidden secrets, the family breakdowns, and the ultimate collapse of the American dream. The decaying form of the play perfectly matches the decay of the society it's portraying.
Then you have someone like Carol Churchill, who tackles history and gender. Her play Top Girls is a brilliant masterclass in nonlinear construction. She literally have characters from entirely different historical time periods meet and have a dinner party together.
It's amazing.
You have a 9th century female pope, a Victorian explorer, and a 13th century Japanese courtesan, all sitting at a restaurant table with a modern 1980s career woman.
It is a stunning use of pastiche and multiple perspectives. Churchill uses this completely impossible, fantastical setup to explore very real, grounded themes about gender roles, the brutal sacrifices required for success, and female identity across the span of human history.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Churchill is famous for her overlapping dialogue in that play. Characters don't politely wait their turn to speak. They just talk right over each other constantly. Right. It's like a chaotic group video call where everyone is talking over each other, but instead of bad Wi-Fi, it's used deliberately. It's like walking into a crowded museum where all the historical portraits have come alive and are screaming over each other to justify their life choices.
Exactly.
You physically cannot process all the audio at once. You, the listener, are forced to become the live editor, actively tuning in to the 9th century pope while actively tuning out the Victorian explorer.
You are curating your own experience of the truth in real time. And if Churchill makes you the editor, Ben Elton makes you the judge and jury.
Yeah, the text mentions Elton's play Popcorn, which tackles the intense violence in modern media and the entertainment industry.
It raises these massive, heavy ethical questions about who is actually responsible for society's violence. Is it the Hollywood directors who make the glamorous, violent movies, or the individuals who watch them and commit the violent acts?
A modernist playwright would have a character step forward at the end, deliver a soaring monologue, and tell the audience exactly who to blame.
Right. Tie it up with a bow. But Elton, using the postmodern framework, pointedly refuses to give a clear answer. He just presents the conflicting arguments, highlights the deep hypocrisy on all sides of the debate, and then the lights go down.
Wow.
He forces the audience to confront their own complicity. By refusing to hand us a moral compass at the end of the play, we are forced to build our own in the parking lot on the way to the car.
You leave the theater arguing with your friends about what it meant, which means the play is still happening in your head.
Exactly.
Now, everything we've talked about so far has been largely Western America, Britain, Europe, but this collapse of grand singular truths isn't just a Western philosophical experiment.
One of the core tenets of postmodernism, as our source text points out, is its absolute rejection of a center versus a periphery.
It strikes me that this absolute refusal to create a center culture is perfectly designed for places navigating massive historical transitions. You physically couldn't write a traditional single-narrative play about certain societies without erasing millions of voices.
It recognizes multiple cultures, multiple realities, and encourages the idea to think global, act local. Because postmodernism is so effective at dismantling dominant authoritarian narratives, it becomes an incredibly powerful lens for understanding complex, shifting societies globally.
Right.
The text specifically highlights how these techniques have been utilized in South Africa.
Right, and we are going to look objectively at how the source text describes this phenomenon. In South Africa, postmodern theatrical techniques like deconstruction, pastiche, and fragmentation are used specifically to deconstruct dominant social and political myths, reflecting the incredibly deep overlapping complexities of a post-apartheid society.
When a society is undergoing massive structural and social shifts, traditional linear storytelling almost always fails to capture the true complexity of the moment.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You need an artistic form that allows for multiple, often conflicting voices to exist in the exact same space without one silencing the other.
The text mentions several key figures doing this work. Marthinus Besson, for example. He uses intense eclecticism, which is just a fancy way of saying he mixes a ton of different theatrical styles together and incredibly strong visual imagery to explore issues of identity and heritage.
Right.
His work, like the play Eek, Anna van Wyck, digs deeply into the fractured, often painful nature of personal history and memory.
We also see Breitenbach's play, Johnny Cockroach. The text describes this as a perfect example of postmodern pastiche. To understand how this works, imagine sitting in the theater on stage left, an actor might be reciting dense historical philosophy, while on stage right, someone is delivering modern, biting political commentary.
Oh, wow.
And layered over all of this is poetry and multiple conflicting voices echoing through the sound system. It is deliberate sensory overload. It doesn't try to be one coherent thing. It embraces being a messy collision of many things at once.
But if words and traditional narratives fail to capture the reality of a fractured society, how do you communicate with the audience at all?
Well, that's the exact problem Ellis Pearson tries to solve with his play, Erg.
Right.
This piece really leans into the surreal. It focuses heavily on the actual physical process of creation, rather than presenting a polished final product. It relies on juxtaposition slamming two completely contrasting ideas, objects, or images right next to each other on stage to create friction.
And, true to the movement, it offers absolutely no fixed meaning.
None.
The audience is entirely responsible for interpreting what that friction means.
The source also notes other vital influences that mix those Brechtian alienation techniques we discussed earlier with postmodern ideas. This includes the Junction Avenue Theater Company, Mesham Maponya, and Ethel Fugard.
Right.
All of them utilize the deconstruction of social and political realities to continuously challenge the audience's understanding of their world, forcing them to look critically at the systems around them.
So what does this all mean? When a South African playwright uses pastiche, overlapping voices, and fragmentation to talk about post-apartheid identity, how does that change the experience for you, the listener, compared to, say, just reading a traditional history book about the exact same era?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, a traditional history book is fundamentally modernist.
Okay, awesome.
It is written by an author acting as an unquestionable authority figure, attempting to give you one definitive, objective truth about a timeline of events. It categorizes, it defines, it puts people into neat pigeonholes.
Right, it gives you the completed jigsaw puzzle and tells you not to touch the pieces.
Yes, exactly. Postmodern theater acknowledges that in complex political realities and any human reality, frankly, there is no single objective truth that captures everyone's experience. There are only perspectives. There are multiple truths, overlapping voices, brutal contradictions, and messy lived experiences. By using fragmentation, sensory overload, and pastiche, the art actually gets much closer to the messy, unresolved reality of human experience than a neat and tidy history book ever could.
It honors the vast complexity of the people actually living through it instead of trying to simplify them for the sake of an easy, digestible narrative.
And it demands that we sit with the discomfort of not having an easy answer.
We have covered some serious ground today. Let's briefly recap this journey we've been on.
Sounds good.
We started by looking at how the immense trauma of the 20th century completely shattered the modernist belief in absolute scientific truth. We explored the philosophical death of the author, where the playwright willingly hands over the ultimate power of meaning directly to the audience.
Right.
And we saw how deconstruction, pastiche, and overlapping realities completely broke down the traditional rules of the stage.
We tracked how playwrights, from Sam Shepard dismantling the American dream, to Carol Churchill layering feminist history, to Martha Besson and Breitenbach exploring post-apartheid identity, all used these fragmented tools to dissect their respective societies.
And we want to connect this right back to you, the listener.
Mm-hmm.
We started this deep dive talking about that everyday feeling of waking up, checking your phone, and being hit with a tidal wave of conflicting information, fragmented media, and overlapping realities.
Yeah, that overload.
Whenever you feel overwhelmed by that information overload today, I want you to remember you are actively experiencing the exact postmodern condition these plays were built to explore. This isn't just dry theater history. It is the fundamental operating system of our current world.
It really is.
And understanding that framework hopefully empowers you to embrace the uncertainty, to critically curate your own meaning, and to play with the chaos rather than fear it.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to ponder something that builds on everything we've unpacked today.
Let's hear it.
If postmodernism is defined entirely by its reaction against the certainties and grand truths of the past, what happens when an entire generation grows up with nothing but postmodern fragmentation?
Oh.
When irony, pastiche, and the rejection of absolute truth are all they have ever known? Will the next great theatrical movement completely reject all this irony and deconstruction and rebel by demanding a radical return to absolute, undeniable sincerity?
Ooh, that is quite the question to chew on. A radical rebellion of sincerity. I love that. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the truths around you. Keep looking for those multiple perspectives, and we will catch you next time.